Um, Great. Okay, we are getting going. We are here. Thank you all for being here. Okay, thank you. My name is Lisa Reynolds. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the state representative for Oregon House District 36. I have special guests here tonight for our town hall. Lakayana Drury of Ward is Bond and Roy Moore from Healing Hurt People, and I will be turning the floor over to them shortly, the virtual floor. Before we get started, I would like to read a land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that the land that we occupy as residents is unceded Indigenous land. The Tri-County area rests on traditional village sites of the Multnomah, Wasco, Cowlitz, Cathlamet, Clackamas, bands of Chinook, Tualatin, Kalapuya, Malala, and many other tribes who made their home along the Columbia River, creating both permanent communities and seasonal encampments. There are many other tribes and nations who lived in the region that are not collectively remembered, and we want to take this moment to remember their contributions in shaping our state and our country. I wanted to convene these particular folks tonight to talk about what I think is really important right now, and this is community-based programming, which I could argue is important for almost any issue that we're trying to tackle as a city, as a county, and as a state. In particular, I was drawn to the work of community violence intervention, after years of working on gun violence prevention policy, which is really more based on laws and rules about who can and cannot purchase or possess guns. And that work is still very important, but it's kind of the really downstream work. And I and several other legislators and advocates are growing increasingly interested in what does the community need in order to help its folks and to prevent violence at kind of the street level. And so street being not really quite the right word I was looking at. And so through that work, I've come to know Lakayana Drury. I know folks that Roy works with. This is the first time I've met Roy on Zoom, although we've been in a lot of the same Zoom rooms. And I just wanted to acknowledge that in the 2022 short session, the legislature committed record investments in violence prevention. So we allocated $11.25 million for Federal Crime Victims of Crime Act, which is called the VOCA, to support survivors of violent crimes, including gun violence. $10 million for state-funded grants for domestic and sexual violence service providers throughout the state, including our federally recognized tribal governments. $2 million for Crime Victims and Survivor Services Division for nonprofit entities who are assisting survivors of domestic and sexual violence. And then the one that I was a little more closely associated with, that I talked to Lakayana and also Joe McFerrin of POIC about quite a bit, is $15 million for community-based violence prevention grants. And this is American Rescue Plan Act dollars that will be going to communities, driven by communities. And that's one of the things we're going to talk about today. In addition, but obviously completely overlapping, is we did pass House Bill 4045, which funds Healing Hurt People, which I'm not going to say anything about because Roy is going to talk about that. The specific program here in the Portland area, as well as expanding it throughout the state. So without further ado, I'm going to turn the camera, or whatever it is, floor, whatever we call it. I'm going to have Mr. Roy Moore of Healing Hurt People go first. And Roy, if you could tell us a little bit about you and certainly about the work of Healing Hurt People and where you see this thing going.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. My name is Roy Moore. I am the co-director of the community care team with POIC. Once again, thank you for having me in this forum. As we were speaking earlier, the highlight and the recognition and support we're getting in this work is really important. I come from the community, and I don't mind telling my story, and my testimony is I'm a survivor of gun violence. I was an ex-gang member, and I was able to change my life. So it's the passion for me to give back to those who are also experiencing some of the things I went through. And a big part of our work is hiring people who are from the community, who understand the dynamics of the people that we serve, what their families are going through, what they're going through, and being able to really be a support system for them, because it takes a village, of course, but having somebody who can recognize and understand, who looks like you and understands the dynamic of your situation is really powerful. Our Healing Hurt People program is our hospital-linked violence intervention and prevention program. It's an evidence-based best practice. Studies have shown that intervening within a 4-hour window of a traumatic event happening is when a person is most likely to make some life-changing decisions. So that's our golden nugget, is we receive calls from our hospital partners, and we show up within that 4-hour window to do our interventions. We're considered to be a part of the care team, and who we hire matters. And we talk about credible messengers, people like myself, people who come from the community, who have lived that life and have made a way out, are really there in those moments to try to have an impact and help people change their life in that moment, because it's a lot of trauma. So all of our workers are trauma informed. And through our work throughout the community, a lot of times we know the families that we're showing up for. We know the dynamics because of our street level outreach team, our life coaches and intensive case managers, and our relationships with community partners in our city. We have a real pulse on the dynamics of the situation. So it makes our work really impactful when we're able to intervene and we look like them, and they know that we understand not their family's dynamic, but their community dynamic. And there's a difference, because within our family, we have a community, our inner circle. So we don't just reach out to victims. We want to be able to try to have an impact within their friends and their support systems to truly change some of the ideologies that we know are associated with the type of violence that we're seeing. So we're excited, and our vision for the future is that credible messengers throughout the city will play a part, throughout the state will play a part in reducing gun violence. We know credible messengers exist everywhere, different communities, different cultures, they're there. So we want to empower, learn, and share strategies so we can have an impact, not just in the city, but statewide.
Great. I thought, can I kind of interview you for a few minutes here, Roy? I'm not going to put you on the spot.
No, please do.
So tell me how this works. Do you all have kind of a team or people on call, I guess, right?
Yes, ma'am. We are on call 24/7.
Yeah.
And we respond to both trauma level 1 hospitals here in the city, OHSU and Legacy Emmanuel.
So the hospital staff is calling you all. And do you feel like that has been pretty accepted by the hospital staff? Like, oh, we got to get, this is a patient who needs Healing Hurt People. Let's get them here pronto. Do you feel like that take up has happened pretty consistently?
Oh, yes. And I mean, our partnership with our hospitals have been great. We just entered into a MOU with Oregon Health Science University. And so far we've responded close to 6 times. And for it to be a new program, our welcome is just beyond belief. And with Legacy, we've been with them since 2018. And so we get calls, we get follow-up calls, we do monthly meetings, which we will be having with OHSU. But yes, it's amazing to see the support that our hospital partners give us.
That's awesome. And then tell me a little bit about the actual interaction with I'm going to call it the patient, right? So this person's been a victim of a violent act. So they have their physical recovery, but you mentioned, of course, all the other things that come with that. Can you tell me a little bit about some of the services you provide, how long you're involved in these young people's lives?
Yeah, so our intensive case managers can have a client on their caseload up to 18 months, but it's not limited to that, because we know it can be a lifelong process. And a lot of our clients and the people that we work with stay with us much longer. And some of the services we provide is everything from education support, employment. We help with relocation to mitigate that immediate threat of violence and to interrupt the retaliatory violence. Of course, we help with medical bills and just low-hanging fruit such as groceries, anything that they need. We can even help with restoration of a house if it's been struck by gun violence. Wow,
that's really great. And And I love that idea of 18 months, right? If need be, that this isn't just, okay, you're out of the hospital, here's a little bag of stuff, be on your way. Because it's really that deep work, I imagine, with your client, but you mentioned their family and their community. And you mentioned kind of evidence-based. Can you tell me a little bit about what we're seeing in terms of success rates, or how you measure success, or what you call success?
Yeah, so our desired outcomes are we want to reduce recidivism, of course, reduce repeat hospital room visits, and reduce acute post-traumatic stress disorder. And our wins are the small things. So when we show up at a hospital and we see the family is obviously upset, and we're hearing rumblings of retaliation, and we're able to intervene in that moment, and there's no violence that happens that night, that's a win for us.
Yes.
And we try to capture that with our testimony from our clients, but also in the long-term effects of their well-being, the clients that sign on to our caseload. And to speak to that, it's intensive case management. So they're having daily contact for the first 90 days with clients on their caseload. And then it moves on to 3 days a week and providing services. And they build a life safety plan and work towards reaching that.
That's great. I can imagine that this work is really rewarding, but I can imagine also quite difficult. How's it been in terms of kind of morale around your colleagues, or is there burnout here? We're hearing a lot about burnout in the medical realm. What are you noticing, Roy, with this work?
Well, our community is suffering a lot of trauma right now. So I think it's affecting everybody in a lot of different ways. But as far as my team and POIC, Rosemary Anderson High School, my organization, very supportive. We speak about some of the trainings we receive. We all receive trauma-informed training, but we also receive a training that's called Who Heals the Healer, and it has really been impactful for the self-care that's needed to do this work, and we're supported in that way. And so we have daily huddles, process groups that we do with our staff to address grief and vicarious trauma. And so that support system that we receive from our organization, I think, is vital for us not to have that burnout that we talk about.
That's really incredible. That is really, really awesome and really great to hear. I shouldn't be surprised, because I'm definitely a huge fan of POIC and Rosemary Anderson High School, and I know Joe is in the room, and we may call on him later after Lakayana. But how it feels like y'all have done this so intentionally and so thoughtfully, and I'm really grateful. I am going to turn the floor over to Lakayana, but I can imagine getting you all in the room together, maybe with Joe. But Lakayana, I wonder if you can. So Lakayana is, you know what? I'm going to have you tell. Lakayana is Executive Director of Word is Bond, which is another incredible program here in Portland. And I know he has a lot to tell us. So I'm going to just turn the floor to Lakayana. Lakayana has been a guest in my town halls before. So nice to have you back here, sir.
Thanks for having me. I'm going to share my screen and do a little PowerPoint, because I feel like that helps organize some of my thoughts. Y'all can all see the screen?
Yes.
Cool. So I know the topic was around violence prevention, and how I like to think of it is like a forward-thinking model of not only just violence prevention, but the ultimate goal, which is safe communities. And I think that that's something that we all want and need. So that's kind of where I'll start. Just a little bit about me, how I would categorize myself or label myself. I'm a storyteller, an educator, and a community organizer. So all of my work kind of flows through that. I can get into this a little bit too, but I am also from the POIC family. When I first came here in 2017 from Philadelphia, but originally from Madison, Wisconsin, I taught at Rosemary Anderson for 3 years. So I can share a little bit more about that. But for me, what does community safety look like? I think this conversation is happening so much right now. And I see it very simply, but I see it as in terms of investment. And I put 4 pillars that I think lead to safe communities: housing, that is fit for human beings, borrowing a little bit from the Black Panthers, but really thinking about like people, the most successful families live in houses, not even just apartments, but full houses that have yards, that are close to schools, that different members of the family have rooms in it. The next piece of that, I already touched on it, is culturally relevant education. And when we look at the most unsafe communities in Portland, or you could take it to the United States as a whole, the education that's being offered in the schools is not relevant to the youth. And that starts even with who's teaching the curriculum. As a Black teacher, I had one Black teacher through K through 12th grade. And I think that that is a travesty of epic proportions. And that's just who's facilitating the curriculum, not even to get into the fact that the actual curriculum that we're learning up until maybe a couple of years ago, and I haven't been a student in the schools for over 10 years, was not relevant to the students' lives or the people that look like them or anything of that nature. And I think we're slowly getting to that point where we're looking at that. And then the last piece I would put in there is just real and meaningful employment. You can't raise a family off minimum wage. You can't raise a family if, off of 2 or 3 jobs and you're like having to pile them all together just to make the basic ends meet. If somebody has a job where they're working 9 to 5, they're able to be off at the end of the day to spend time with their kids, to look after them, to provide resources to them, whether it's camps or things of that nature. And for me particular, as a biracial individual, my dad is Black, my mom's white. The most successful families that I saw as a kid, and the most complete families with 2 parents and a nice house, were white people. And that's not on accident. Government has assisted in establishing the white middle class and a lot of other things like that, whether it's the GI Bill, whether it's the Homestead Act, and those things were not offered to Black families. And that's why we see Black families as we do today, whether it's mass incarceration that pulls a lot of the fathers out of the homes, whether it's lack of education that has Black students saying, why bother showing up to a school if my teachers don't care about me, or if this education isn't relevant to my daily needs. And then the fourth piece I just put in there was just strong families, which are impacted by all 3 of those things. And if we invest in the family, then I see community safety really happening, as opposed to our current model, which is like, let's have a bunch of police and let's arrest a bunch of people, and somehow that will deter people from doing crime. When I see most crime, I would say, I don't have a statistic for you, but I would say 75 to 85% of crime is based on necessity of needs or the current situation that they're in, and not because people are just bad people that are just out to commit crime. So that's my worldview of how I see things. And as I said, when I came to Portland, I taught at Rosemary Anderson High School, and that really shaped my worldview of how I see Portland, but it also really connected with what I'd already seen in my own life growing up as a youth of color, and in a household with a single parent and without a ton of extra resources. And that there's, and so how I view Portland was shaped by the students that I worked with at Rosemary Anderson, which is an alternative high school, which works with youth who have been on the least receiving end of a lot of the resources that exist within Portland. And I would say that there's multiple worlds in Portland. There's the world that a lot of people live in, which is, brunches on Sunday and hikes on the weekend and going down in Alberta. And then there's the world that we hear about on the news, which is shooting every other night, drug abuse, domestic violence. And that's the world that a lot of our youth live in. Creating opportunities for young people, crossing the finish line versus elevating. When I was working at my high school, we were able to help a lot of young people cross that finish line of high school, which was even a threshold for a lot of them that wasn't something they would be able to cross. But then what's next? How do we help them get to that next level? And I think Portland's most underutilized resource, the resource that we waste the most, is the resource of our youth. They're the future, right? They will power our organizations, our businesses, if we engage them, right? But if we just let them fall by the wayside and there's nothing for them to meaningfully do, then they're just left to their own devices. And we know what happens when that happens. And then just the low education, not the low education standards, well, that too, but the low standards for Black and brown students. And when I came in contact a lot, my first few years of teaching, what the feedback I got was that our students are not expected, our Black students are not expected to be much, to do much, and they internalize that. And I was all the way across the country in Wisconsin, I was given that same message myself. And that's really what motivated me to become a teacher and to do this work. And that's eventually what led to the opportunity to create Word is Bond, which is a nonprofit that I founded and now do full time after leaving POIC, which was established in 2017. And our narrative is to rewrite our mission is to rewrite the narrative between young Black men and law enforcement, but it goes beyond even that original idea to really empower rising Black men as they are coming into their adulthood. Me personally, I graduated high school with a 2.3 GPA. I met my father when I was 10 years old. And when I graduated high school, I didn't really know what I could be as a Black man or what the opportunities were out in this world. And now that I've been able to achieve a lot of that and see the world, what my goal is to help our other rising Black men have those paths and see and provide what's not able to be provided in the school system, as far as expanding their worldview, as far as connecting them with other Black men doing a lot of different professions, not just athletes and entertainers, but lawyers and doctors and teachers and all of that. And then unapologetically focusing on that. There's something that happens when we focus on Black people and young Black men, that all of a sudden, all these questions come up about what about everybody else, right? When we have girls groups or study clubs for different groups of people, there's never a problem with it. But somehow when we say we're going to focus on rising Black men, all of a sudden it becomes, well, what about everyone else? And a lot of those questions disappeared after George Floyd was killed, unfortunately, but people finally started to realize why we have programs just for rising Black men, because what I didn't want to do was just create a program that served everybody in every ism and every possible thing. I think that we do the best work when that's what equity is about, when we specifically focus on specific groups, right? Rarely do you go to a restaurant, you just have something that serves all types of food. We know what kind of restaurants those are. They aren't really that good. When you can specialize like in street tacos or vegan food, that's when you do your best work. And we want to do our best work by serving a specific group of people and providing culturally relevant content. Because as I grew up, I was in programs for kids on free and reduced lunch, or programs for all the kids of color, or all the kids that were bad, for example. But there was never one that said, I'm going to focus on your needs as a young Black man. So that's what we do with Word is Bond. And I'm going to wrap up so I don't take all the time, but we serve youth ages 16 to 21. We recruit from schools across Portland, public schools, private schools, even some college students. So the young men that are in our program, they're learning from about other Black experiences from themselves. Like we had one young man, he lived downtown this summer, and that blew the rest of our youth's minds because they never met another Black kid that had lived downtown. And the kids that come from private schools are able to share what they're learning there with the students that are in public schools or in alternative schools, and youth that have had a lot of contact with police and youth that have had none at all. So we do things like implicit bias trainings, know your rights trainings, leadership development, things of that nature. And I'm just going to fast forward here all the way to what we've just been doing in the last couple of months. In February, we did an In My Shoes project. A lot of what we do with Word is Bond is storytelling. How do we elevate the stories of young Black men? Because our stories never going to get told. And when they are told, they're never told by us. They're told by other people for the purpose of scaring them about who we are. So we put the microphone literally into the hands of our rising Black men and let them tell their stories, whatever they are. And they don't have to be, rags to riches stories. And, we don't want to just assume that all of our Black men have been, beaten up by the cops, and that maybe their story may not be. So we did 18 walking tours across Portland where neighbors could come and hear the stories of these young men in their communities, telling their stories, highlighting different parts, experiences, reading poetry, And that was really, really successful. I know Representative Reynolds joined us on a couple of those tours. So that was awesome to see just the cross section of people that attended and the empowerment that our youth felt of getting to decide, like, well, I'm doing a tour. What am I going to tell people about? What exactly is in my community? What has my experience been here? So that was really exciting for us. And then 2 weeks ago, or last week, actually, we just returned from our Spring Leadership Forum, which was a 7-day trip to Washington, D.C., where we took the youth there to learn about historically Black colleges, Black history, and work on a public policy proposal. They met with Senator Wyden, Senator Merkley. They met with the Assistant Chief of the DC Police, which was another interesting experience to meet a police force that was almost all Black. Every single officer in that room was a Black officer. And so that was really interesting for them to get to meet students from different colleges. So these 3 young men in the middle are holding their copies of their poetry book that they presented them with, and got to talk to them about their experience living on the East Coast. And then we also met with a local high school there and talked with the students, which is, again, probably one of their favorite experiences, because you got to hear from other peers of their age. So that's in a nutshell of what we do, my worldview, and how I see violence prevention is about building safe communities and empowering youth and giving families and communities the resources rather than punishing them for being poor or underserved. So
wow, thank you. Thank you for all that. And I was sharing earlier, I got my own copy of this is the second book of poems put out by Word is Bond participants. The first one is here on my bookshelf somewhere. And I actually, and I will be having, copies of this in my office in Salem. So thank you so much for that, Lakayana. And I'm going to ask you a few questions like I asked Roy Moore. And then I thought I might, hopefully, if Joe is able, I might pin all 3 of you here, and would love to hear your thoughts. But tell me a little bit about what you think, how you think this program, your Word is Bond program, changes your unapologetic focus on young Black men, which of course I completely applaud.
So for a city like Portland, where there's not many other young Black men around, it's really important to have that space. It's like, it's one of those spaces where you can be safe, where you don't have to explain, your backstory and things of that nature. It keeps youth engaged. So when we look at, these summer months, for example, we have a 6-week summer internship program, and it's not a gun violence prevention program, but it prevents gun violence because the youth are engaged, right? That's how we see it. And then it's paid, so they are able to make money, which is also important. Again, a lot of our youth are coming from families that don't have, a ton of resources. So that's how I see us kind of fulfilling that. And then we also just expanding their ability to see different parts of Portland, different parts of the community. They go camping, they go hiking, they learn CPR, they meet youth from other parts of the program. And that was one thing that stuck out to me this summer, was hearing a youth say, without this program, I wouldn't have met some of these kids from the other side of the river or these other parts. And so it's like helping bring together different youth in Portland. And then it's an investment piece, right? Because these youth now go back out in their community and they're going to be engaging. And that's the thing, like, we can, if we invest in people rather than like punishing them for other things, we'll save money. It's financially it's easier to send a kid to college than it is to house them in jail. So I think it's an investment piece too, that is, we haven't even seen the results of it. In 10, 15 years, you'll be able to see what these youth who've gone through this program have really been able to accomplish, which I think will be a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. And, when you shared with me, like, some of the summer internship opportunities, I mean, it's pretty incredible stuff. We're not flipping burgers, right? Tell me a little bit about some of the summer internship opportunities for your folks.
Yeah, so it's a 3-year program. We've built 2 years out of it. So the first year is they're one large cohort, and they go through the program together, 6 weeks. Every Tuesday, officers come in, and throughout the other weeks, they're sprinkled in with other leadership opportunities. When they return for the second year, they have offsite internships, and that's where they get to use the skills from the first year in settings. And I'm really particular about what these spaces are because I want them to be professional environments that they couldn't just walk into off the street, because it's like, we want to provide an experience that will help you in your future that you couldn't just get outside of it. So for example, we had Hood to Coast, we had the Multnomah County District Attorney's Office. And so our ambassador who was placed there, he was the youngest intern in their office that summer and the only one that wasn't in law school. So for him to be 19 years old, that's a huge opportunity, right? He's rubbing shoulders not only with attorneys and learning with the system, but he's meeting college students, and he's in over his head in a good way, where it's like he's getting those experiences. We had the Urban League, we had Titan Freight, Brown Hope, so Simple X. So there's just a ton of opportunities, and we're going to be getting ready for our internships this summer. So if anybody's listening and they want to have an intern or have an office space that would be a good opportunity, we're paid through SummerWorks. So it's of no cost to the hosting office to pay their wages. They just have to provide meaningful work for 6 to 7 weeks for these ambassadors.
That is awesome. We have, both of you, I know Lakayana, your roots are in POIC, Rosemary Anderson High School, and Healing Hurt People is still housed in that umbrella. I wonder if we can bring Joe McFerrin on. Is that okay, Joe? If we bring you on, and maybe
Sure.
you could give a 5-minute. We're not going to let you off easy, but let me find you here. Hi, Joe.
How you doing?
Joe's in his car. We just came off a really nice event celebrating your Work Connects programs downtown.
Yes. Yes. So what did you have in mind?
Well, I would, this is, Joe McFerrin is POIC Rosemary Anderson High School. In fact, Rosemary Anderson was your grandmother. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about the program? And I mean, you have really grown this into a pretty incredible reach out to the community. But if you, and I know you could talk for hours, but we'll keep you.
No, I'm good at keeping it tight. I'll keep it real tight. So I've been there 27 years in the organization, and we were able to, at the time, we were a small school, and there was just more need. And so over the last, say, 20 years or so, we've been able to build our core services to include employment and training, family wraparound, mental health, and public safety. So we got 160 or so employees now. We've got about 11 different offices that people can come in and get help. So we're all over the place. But what I would like to really focus on here is that none of that happens without a Lakayana and a Roy. I want to be very clear about that. The reason I showed up really was to listen to them. I mean, really, because I've been a part of their world, and I am so proud and inspired by what both of them have done and their contributions they're making to our community. And so I kind of showed up to really listen to them about the stuff that they're doing. And I can't tell you how I'm honored to just be here in the audience to listen to them from their perspective, making their impact on our community. And Representative Reynolds, I don't know what took us so long to get connected. I think, yeah, I don't know how, I have no idea how we've just, you came out to the school, and I appreciated that. And, but I just seemed like we should have been connecting on this work a long time ago. And I just want to say, I appreciate you. I appreciate your advocacy. I appreciate the work that you're doing to help all of us put our best foot forward for the next generation and create an environment where our young people can thrive. And like Lakayana said, walk down the street and just feel optimistic that, hey, I can own a home, I can have a family, I can do whatever I want to do. So yeah, that's what I would say. And unfortunately, part of the work that we do at POIC is that, you know, we're there for the victims, and we're there for some of the knuckleheads who are the perpetrators. And hopefully, I mean, I feel like that there are times when we do make a difference and we do save someone's life every once in a while. And that's just a part of where we are. I mean, if I had it my way, we wouldn't have to do all of that, right? We could focus more on entrepreneurship and education and all kinds of things. But fortunately, you do need people out here in the community, from the community, trying to influence those who may bring harm to do something different. And that's a role that we play, in addition to some of the others. And Roy does an outstanding job. I don't think people understand. I mean, Roy, I think, has been to the hospital the last 5 days. He might have been to I get a text when Roy goes to the hospital. I get a text that says, hey, I'm headed to Emmanuel, I'm headed to OHSU. And yeah, it happens quite frequently. And so I'd like to believe, and I do believe, that we make a difference in that lane in terms of trying to give victims and perpetrators an opportunity to do something different for the greater good of the entire community. So thanks for calling on me, but I'm more here to listen.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thanks. And yeah, so we do have one of an amazing community activist and smart guy, Kevin Fitz, had a question. Kevin, now I have two of you here. I'll ask both of you to unmute.
Yeah, I don't know which one I'm speaking from. Good afternoon, Representative Reynolds. My name is Kevin Fitz. I work for an organization called the Oregon Mental Health Consumers Association. Our mantra is nothing about us without us. And first of all, I just want to say word is bond is just amazing. I was following along on Twitter, your guys' trip to DC. I have a board member, Garrett Andre Fields, who is an African-American person, post-prison, very active in representing people who come from criminal justice systems that are institutionally racist. And to that end, last summer, myself and Garrett Andre Fields met with leadership in the state of Oregon regarding the Racial Justice Council that the Governor's Council had. And the question that we asked them was, Garrett Andre Fields is above board of being a young African-American person who's got caught up in the criminal justice system. He and a fellow friends of his are willing and able to stand up and above board and say, I would like to serve on this council. Yes, I'm a felon. Yes, I'm an African-American. Yes, I experienced racism in the system. We took this to 3 or 4 state executives and to Senator Lou Frederick and Representative Janelle Bynum. They all agreed that the Racial Justice Council of the governor's office should be above board. We're not just appointing executive managerial class people to speak from people who haven't been to the hood or haven't been to the pen. I would love to connect with your group and tell them a little bit more about what we've discovered and why they said they don't want that kind of vocal representation above board. And we think that that's a misnomer. We think if you're going to be talking about eliminating racism from our institutions, particularly our criminal justice system, having people who have been there with the lived experience of that experience, giving voice to that is very meaningful. And we don't think our systems will change without adequate above board representation from people who've been there. I just wanted to put that out there and also say I love your work and it's great to see this. This is very exciting and I'm thrilled about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin.
Yeah, Kevin, thanks. If you can drop your email, or message me, I would appreciate that.
And I can connect the two of you by email too as well. Sometimes it's hard to follow chats and things like that. I mean, yeah, from what Kevin's describing makes perfect sense to me. If we're going to have, convene these boards, right? Yeah, and it sounds like they put a yeoman's effort into that. What do you all, let me ask you this, this is a big election year, right? In particular, probably one of the most important, probably the most important race is the governor's race. I would argue I'm also closely watching the Multnomah County Chair's race. What do you all wish you could, if you could influence or whisper in the ear of let's say once, the new governor's elected, what would you ask the governor of Oregon to do to try to help your communities? Oh, do I have to unmute you? Okay, I'm going to ask you both to unmute. Okay.
No, that's a great question. And thank you, Representative Reynolds, for that question. I think for us, it's sustainability. It's long-term investment for the work that we do. Is really important for us to, one, keep people staffed. And a part of our vision is to really professionalize this work. We want to create livable wages for the people that we work with. Similar to the community health worker, we want them to be state certified. And so long-term investments will allow us to create that and build capacity, once again, not just in the city, but throughout the state. So I think that would be my number one ask.
I think that's great. Then I do want to hear from you, Lakayana. And one thing I think we're all finding, and I'm seeing this in behavioral health care, I'm seeing this in childcare. We might even be seeing it a little bit in nursing, although nursing wages tend to be a little bit better, but we've all kind of benefited as a society from the fact that people, were willing to provide childcare for really low wages, either out of love of the job or it gave them a certain amount of flexibility. And those days are over, right? That's why we have huge workforce shortages. People realize that, it's really hard to pencil out making minimum wage, caring for other people's children, which is just absurd that that's what we pay those folks. So I do feel like we're in a little bit of a reset right now that especially those who take care of our most vulnerable, especially those who work on the front lines with human beings, need to make living wages. These need to be jobs that are family wage jobs so we can really bring people into this, the most important work that's happening. And Lakayana, I hope I didn't answer that. I didn't mean to answer the question I asked. Building on
No, it was what would I ask the governor?
Or what would you want the governor? We're going to have a new governor here, right? Starting in January, kind of clean, a little bit of clean slate, maybe. What do you want? What do you think you want the governor to do? What would be the most meaningful thing he or she could do to improve life for the Oregonians that you all are working with day in and day out?
Yeah, I would specifically want to know what their plan is for Black people in the state of Oregon. I don't think that there is a plan. And if I don't think there is, as a Black adult that's in these spaces, just imagine what the average kid who's going to school, Black kid who's going to school feels. They're on a roller coaster that they have no control over. They don't know when it's going to let them off, where they're going to be. And I've come in contact with too many youth who feel, and I can sense it, that they don't feel like anybody has a plan for them. And they're 100% right. And if I'm working in these systems and I don't know it, then they're definitely not going to know it. So I want to know, what is your plan specifically to help Black people out? And the plan that seems to be right now is just like have a bunch of community organizations, bend over backwards to try and provide services. POIC and Word is Bond and other organizations like us cannot be the sole model for uplifting Black communities in the state of Oregon. The government has to help out. And I want to see a response similar to how they treated COVID. We should look at the state of Black people in Oregon as an epidemic. When you look at rates of education, housing, employment, incarceration, you take any of those, they're abysmal to a point of that there should be government intervention. Similar to how they did COVID, everything should be on the table. When COVID happened, money, like direct payments to people, all those things, canceling school, whatever they had to do, was those options are on the table. And I want to see that same urgency applied to how do we help we've never been at a place in Oregon or any place in this country where Black people have been at standard level. So how do we help raise that up so that they can finally be competing and sustaining themselves at that level. So that would be my question to them, among other questions.
Yeah, that's really powerful. You know, one thing that I'm finding, and I'm pretty new in this role, is we often don't have the numbers, right? We don't, you know, I'll ask, well, how many, we've been looking at behavioral healthcare services, like how many new behavioral health workers have we brought online? How many behavioral health workers of color are we training? Because we have actually devoted resources specifically for culturally competent behavioral health services. And everyone kind of like, oh, well, we're just not really sure. Like, I feel like we need the numbers, we need the metrics, and then we need to show what our progress is. We need to have goals. I kind of talked to my team about red, yellow, green, right? Are we reaching our goals? Are we green? Are we like falling far short red? Or are we kind of in the middle yellow? And I do think I will say the government does a poor job in collecting the data and then tracking and then showing whether we're reaching our goals or not. And I think that's plays into a little bit about what you're saying, Lakayana. Great. And Lakayana, what's next for you? What a year. And Lakayana's right that I was on 2 of the Mortisbon walking tours. They sold out they were free, but they sold out really quickly. I was really like, wow, I got 2 tickets. But did a walk through Portland and also out here in Washington County. So what are you seeing? Do you think the DC trip's going to be every year, every other year? What are you looking at for that? That looked like a really powerful moment. Will the In My Shoes walking tours be back?
Yes to all of that. I'm trying to pull the Joe McFerrin model. I'm trying to grow from a small organization and build it into a big organization. We're still at level 2, but we're getting ready for our 6th annual summer internship program, Rising Leaders. And we just brought on 2 new staff, so really having the ability to grow that and have more youth in that program. And then the walking tours will be back at some point. We'll do private ones for the time being, but at least next February those will be back. The Spring Leadership Forum absolutely will continue to be a yearly component of the school year program, and then adding on another layer, like a capstone layer. So we've got years 1 and 2 for the summer internship program, but that final year, the 3rd year, I want to implement a trip to West Africa for the youth to kind of round out their experiences as rising Black men. So that would be a piece that hopefully we can pursue in 2023, summer 2023. So big goals. So
Yeah.
And small steps to continue to work there, just kind of continue to lay the foundation.
Well, and I will say, so we have Joe in his car. We have Roy here. We have you. I mean, you all have really built amazing programs. I know how, I kind of think of these things as kind of, carving them out of granite, right? And I'm curious, you're all mindful that at some point, you all may move on to something else. How do you envision, building your team so that I'm sure right now things are very, very dependent on Lakayana, very dependent on Roy, very dependent on Joe, who's by far the oldest of the bunch. No, I'm teasing you, Joe. I did see a pretty impressive team of the POIC and Rosemary Anderson High School at today's event. But how are you guys doing on that team building, or, kind of not taking so much on your own shoulders?
I know I said was going to be quiet, but this is a space I love to play in. So in our organization, and I learned through just listening to so many of the folks that I stand on their shoulders, and why succession planning and leadership development is so important. And so in our organization, I'm 3 deep. So we've got my COO. If something were to happen to me, I've got a COO that will step right in if something happens to her. And then there's another layer. We've got we created a new executive level chief. I think it's going to roll out chief wellness and family service officer, something like that. But really, that's succession planning. And then when you think about Roy is being pushed. Roy supervises maybe 10 right now. But he's being pushed to get somebody to replace him. So in our organization, I agree. I mean, it's all about replacing yourself, and it provides opportunities for you know, folks just entering into the workforce. So it's something we're doing systemic. We're doing it in a very strategic and systemic way, and I believe that it's going to sustain our organization. We're going to continue to be effective, but it's also going to carve out room for the next generation of leaders. And that's probably the thing that I'm going to be most proud of in terms of when I hang them up, so to speak, when I hang up my shoes, is that whole, how many folks we've been able to give opportunities to lead, start their own thing, or just take on more.
Great, thank you. Do you all?
So Roy, we just so you understand how intense this is, Roy and Haig, we have phone calls every morning. There's a briefing, and they have to have their agendas. They have to talk about their vision, what they're doing with their teams, what's happening on the street, and it's rapid fire. And I'm constantly pushing them to grow. In my opinion, it's definitely master's degree type of training on a daily basis. So yeah. I'm glad you brought that up. I wish more organizations would prioritize succession planning.
Great. Do you all have anything to add to that? I mean, you're both, so young and vibrant. I don't mean to think you're going. Succession makes it sound like you're going to retire or something. But how are you all thinking about that, Roy and Lakayana?
To Joe's point, I'm going to have a master here soon. So I appreciate that. I'm learning how to pass on what I'm learning, and that's important as well. But I think for us, one of the things that we value and we hope for with dealing with the vulnerable population that we serve through Healing Hurt People is to hopefully have them complete our program and then be able to hire them on as credible messengers.
Yes.
That's how we want to build capacity and keep the program going. And some of our desired, it's not the matrix, but some of our desired outcomes is to have our clients turn into credible messengers who work with our program.
That's really beautiful. Thank you. Yeah.
For us, it's kind of the wild, wild west right now. We're still at that infancy phase where everything's, up in the air, but we're definitely, mentorship's a big thing. So I had a mentor growing up, and Joe's been able to mentor me too. And we just hired a former student, Iman, who was a student of mine in 2017 and 18 at POIC, and then came on to Word is Bond. So the cycle is continuing. It's kind of the model, but I'm not going to say that we have some elaborate plan. It's learning by fire and by trial and by error. Eventually we would love to get to that, but it's not even as much as important at this point, of who operates next. For me right now, it's just serving. And once we can build up enough of that capacity, I'd love to be able to think about, how could we carry it on to the next generation? Because I think that that's important. But everybody, all the youth, they're just a little bit removed from me and from the experience. So that I'm hoping that and I know they are picking up tidbits and learning as we're going. So we'll definitely see how it unfolds in the future and what they're able to take away from what I'm learning.
Wow. Well, I think that might be, I'm opening up the room here. I think this might be a nice note to end on. I'm really, really grateful that Roy Moore of Healing Hurt People and Lakayana Drury of Word is Bond were here with us. We corralled Joe McFerrin to say a few things, and really grateful for that from POIC and Rosemary Anderson High School. Folks, this is the future of how we're going to really repair some of the entrenched. Racism is almost too mild a word, but dangerous racist policies that Oregon has been completely complicit in. And I think Lakayana's right. We need a deliberate plan, not just kind of hoping for the best. So, and these are the folks doing the work. And my job is to connect with money as best I can and let them do the work. But also, of course, Lakayana, whatever else the government needs to do to truly direct solutions to years of inequity and abuse. So thank you all much. If anyone else, if we want to have Roy and Lakayana just have a parting sentence or two or three, if you would like, I'd love to hear your parting words with us tonight.
Go ahead, Roy.
Yeah, thank you, Representative Reynolds, and thank you for this forum for us to talk about our work. I just want to bring awareness that in the clients that we serve, that victim shaming is real. Our motto is all victims deserve a chance to heal. So we advocate for them. And I think our work really represents that. And when we talk about those who are underserved, a lot of times the highest risk, the people who have the stigma of being criminals and being caught up in a certain lifestyle get forgotten as being victims and the trauma that they face. So anytime I get a chance to speak about my work, I want to really, really bring awareness to the trauma that we're facing and how we're trying to address that historically and right now, because we're seeing all type of it.
Thank you, Roy.
I would just like to say, Representative Reynolds, thanks for having us and uplifting our voices, and to the community members that we're listening in today, and just continue to share our work, spread the word. That's how we continue to get out there and help. And just echo what Roy said as well. I think that was a really well said piece, and look forward to continuing to work in the community with everyone.
Well, thank you. Thank you all for joining, and especially Roy and Lakayana. Have a great evening. There's still, it's staying light out later. Beautiful evening tonight. Really, it's really an honor that you all chose to spend your time with us this evening, and obviously a true honor and joy to have Roy Moore and Lakayana Drury with us. So thank you all. We'll see you next time.